Peter Hitchens is here, columnist at the Mail on Sunday. Peter, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
I've been struck this day by the contrast, I suppose you might say, in what Joe Biden was and what Donald Trump is. I know you're not a massive fan of Donald Trump, but what he's doing in the Middle East does seem to be quite unprecedented.
Well, it's unprecedented in that the world has changed. The huge change over the past 10 years has been the extraordinarily clever tactical maneuvering of Benjamin Netanyahu and to get Saudi Arabia on his side by making Iran his principal enemy. That has had big short-term benefits for him in having better relations with that part of the Muslim world, while having much worse relations with the Iranian Shia-dominated part of the Muslim world. I don't know how that will end, but that's a lot of the basis of what's going on now. But the friendship between the United States and Saudi Arabia goes back to 1945, when Franklin Roosevelt carpeted one of his warships with carpets, and indeed I think installed camels on them so that he could meet King Ibn Saud of Saudi Arabia and propose a long-term alliance, which made Winston Churchill grind his teeth because he was trying to get the same thing.
Yeah.
There's nothing particularly new in that.
No, there isn't. I mean, but I mean, I thought of you yesterday when I saw the new Syrian leader, who's still categorised as a terrorist in the United States of America.
Oh my goodness!
Shaking the hand of Donald Trump, and I thought of you, and I thought of the IRA. I don't know why.
Well, it's again the posturing and hypocrisy of particularly of the United States and this country, who go on and on for years and years about some particular terrorist group, and then find themselves having dinner with them and giving them money, and here we are again. And what we have effectively done in Syria is installed an Al Qaeda government, and everyone's fallen very quiet about it. I don't know what's going on in Syria really, because the reporting from there is pretty inadequate. But I really wouldn't like, for instance, to be a Christian Arab in Syria at the moment, let alone an Alawite. No, and yet, but people have fallen silent about this. People are constantly telling us what a wicked regime the Assad regime was, which it was. Yeah. And there's no question about that. But we consort, as you see now, with all kinds of wicked regimes. For goodness sake, Saudi Arabia remains, for all the cosmetic reforms and the treatment of women and so forth, it remains one of the worst despotisms in the world. And it's never really got over the murder in the most horrific way of one of its most prominent dissidents, poor Mr. Khashoggi, who was both murdered and then dismembered in a Saudi consulate. No one doubts that was the work of the government which Donald Trump's been consorting with. So the whole structure of moralizing and claiming to be on the side of freedom and law in the Middle East doesn't stand a moment's examination, and I just get very tired of the way in which grown-up people. I understand why naive and ill-informed people can fall for this, because they have very limited sources of information. But the number of politicians and senior media figures who allow this stuff to go past them without criticising it is completely astounding and really rather embarrassing for our trade.
But is it not really rather about kind of what you might call sort of willful forgetfulness, or, the ignoring of facts, or just the disputation of history? They don't want to remember what was before because it's a bit embarrassing. So they sort of wipe the slate clean and go, it's a bit like Keir Starmer with his immigration speech on Monday, pretending that he's now anti-immigration, which everybody believes is untrue.
Well, again, the Starmer behaviour is profoundly disgraceful because of the blatant dishonesty of it. And if you really have previously had principles on this, which certainly a lot of New Labour people claimed they were principled on the matter of migration, they regarded opposition to immigration as an evil and sordid position, which they've now adopted. Well, I don't see how they can remain in public life after doing a U-turn of that size. It's just not possible to claim to be a serious person if you reverse your position quite obviously for political gain to such an extent. And I'm sorry, there just isn't anything left of anybody who does that. Has he been through a dark night of the soul, or has he been through a dark night of the polls? I think it's a dark night of the polls. in this business of the Middle East, again, I understand that it's necessary for our government to keep this country ultimately safe, to have dealings with unpleasant foreign regimes. And everybody knows that you will have to do this if you want, and that's the ultimate purpose of foreign policy, to keep your people safe and to keep them prosperous. Then you will have to deal with horrible people. Don't, while you're doing so, pretend to be mounting a principled, ethical foreign policy. That's all I ask. And the way in which the attacks on the Assad regime were couched, and the way in which support was given quite blatantly to the al-Nusra Front, which everybody knew was an al-Qaeda front organization. And the result of this now, in that Syria has basically an al-Qaeda government, and everybody's crawling to it. And the aid which Syria has so badly needed, since we reduced so much of it to rubble with our intervention, is now flowing to this person. But they would not, for several years after the war had come to a sort of end, they would not countenance any aid to Syria. People were living in the ruins of the place with no aid from the West allowed. Now it's flowing. What is this? To kindly explain to me how it is that Al-Qaeda, the organization we were told from September the 11th, 2001, for years and years and years, to hate and fear and loathe, is suddenly our friend.
Yeah, it's very confusing.
It's beyond me, and you cannot, as I say, why should you listen in future to anybody whose principles, if they exist, are so shallow and so easily altered by shifts in power? Either you meant it, or you didn't mean it. If you didn't mean it, do you mean anything you say now? And should we try? So much of our discourse is based on this moralizing. Much of our discourse, I should say, about Russia is based on similar moralizing. Yes, of course, the Putin regime is a revolting despotism, which nobody can defend. But that doesn't stop us dealing with Saudi Arabia. It doesn't stop us dealing with China. It doesn't stop us dealing with Egypt. So can we please stop pretending that is our motivation in this case?
But isn't this why also so many people have disillusioned with mainstream two-party politics, and they just they don't believe a word of what either the Tory party or the Labour Party say? When Tory ministers, former ministers, get up and talk to me on this show, or they talk in Parliament about, you know, Labour doing nothing to stop the immigration crisis, I mean, everybody just falls about laughing, because they go, well, you basically encouraged the immigration crisis from 2019 on. It got worse, much worse, under Boris Johnson and then under Rishi Sunak. So for them to say, well, we're going to fix it if you give us another chance, nobody believes it.
It's totally dangerous. And for years and years and years, through unprincipled behaviour and the making of promises they never intended to keep, political leaders of both major parties have drawn on the well of trust in this country. And it's now empty. Yeah. And when people cease to trust their political leaders, then all kinds of horrible things become possible. And I fear very much for the whole future of law-governed democracy in this country. And one of the main reasons, if it falls, and one of the main reasons it will fall, will be precisely because so many unprincipled people have used the trust of the voters over and over again to promise things which they never intended to deliver, and to claim to hold positions they didn't truly hold. Yeah. And ultimately, to begin with, people long to trust authority. This is, again, in the Lucy Letby case, one of the reasons why so many people are so reluctant to believe that she was sent to prison on the basis of nothing, is they want to trust the police. They want to trust the courts. If we live in a society where the police and the courts can't be trusted, then we live in anarchy, don't we?
Well, that's right.
You want to believe in it, just as you want to believe that your political leaders know what they're doing and mean what they say. But if they carry on behaving in this fashion for long enough, then people will begin to say, well, why should we have anything like this anymore? And the desire for some sort of strong state and some sort of great leader will grow among people. And I don't think that as I say, the freedom and the law-governed democracy which we've had for so long can endlessly survive this misbehaviour by the people who live at the top of it.
Yeah, and as you say, particularly if they say one thing and do something completely different. And we had a lot of people talking to us yesterday about a heat pump situation. You know, lots of people getting heat pumps installed in their homes, many more than I would ever have thought. And I asked the question, how is it so many people are falling for the heat pump garbage and swallowing the propaganda? And it's exactly as you say, because they want to believe the people telling them that these things are good are actually telling the truth, when of course they're not.
I know people who are doing it, and they're lovely people, and they're principled people who genuinely believe that they're saving the planet.
Yeah.
By causing themselves all this disruption and digging and immense expense for a device which, when it's all over, won't heat their home properly. No. But they genuinely believe it, what they've been told. And when the disillusion kicks in, how bad is it going to be?
Yeah. It's going to be awful, and it's astonishing that we seem to have arrived at this point in where if you tell the truth, you're painted as some kind of strange creature that obviously isn't with the great role of society, and you're some kind of outlier because you're a bit eccentric and possibly mad, and maybe some kind of conspiracy theorist, just because you don't go along with the PR.
Well, the whole term conspiracy theorist was invented to diminish and marginalize people who didn't fit in with the mainstream. It doesn't really mean anything. And there are lots of conspiracies which take place every day in London between journalists and politicians, for instance, and they're called lunch.
Yes.
So they're private meetings, which nobody admits to having taken place, of which people get together to pursue an objective which they don't want other people to know they have. Well, that's a conspiracy. It's not a load of people in Guy Fawkes hats in a tavern in Deptford plotting to stab somebody. It's what people do all the time. They get together and pursue secret ends without letting people know what they're doing. And to believe that doesn't take place is frankly to be a naive idiot.
Yes.
So everybody who's got any sort of idea what's going on could be jeered at as a conspiracy theorist. It really isn't a term anybody should pay any attention to. And yet it is still, in this society of trust, an extremely good way of marginalizing dissent. And generally, the moment you're called a conspiracy theorist, you're on the back foot.
Yeah, exactly right. And well, long may it continue, I suppose. I mean, I still avoid as many of those types of lunches as I ever did. I hope you do as well.
I used to do them a lot in the 1980s, and that's when I learned how it all works.
Yes.
And I know that it still goes on. So whenever I see a story in the newspaper, I think, who's been lunching with who?
Very true. Peter Hitchens, thank you very much indeed. Columnist at the Mail on Sunday.